I'm Tracy Sable. Tonight on EWTN News Nightly, new revelations. The 4-year Trump investigation ends with a scathing report involving the FBI's actions. We're on Capitol Hill. New Constitution. Vatican releases the third Constitution in history since Pope John Paul II. We have a report from Rome. Lives on the line. A new study reveals the concerning state of foster care homes in the U.S. We have a report. And Journey of Faith. The Bible Museum here in the nation's capital is hosting a new exhibit honoring a cherished Catholic tradition. These stories and more tonight.
From EWTN, the Global Catholic Network, this is EWTN News Nightly.
Thank you for being with us tonight. Our top story, the Trump-era special counsel investigating the origins of the FBI's Russia investigation issued its final report. John Durham was appointed by former President Trump's attorney general. His report is deeply critical of the FBI and states the FBI did not have factual evidence and never should have launched the Russia collusion probe in the first place. Durham found that FBI relied on, quote, raw, unanalyzed, and uncorroborated intelligence. Also, there was significant reliance on investigative leads provided or funded by Trump's political opponents. On the heels of that report, a House Judiciary Subcommittee held a hearing revisiting the implications of the FACE Act. The Freedom of Access to Clinic Entrances Act of 1994 ensures Americans access to pro-life and pro-abortion health services. Capitol Hill correspondent Eric Rosales joins us now with more. Eric?
Well, good evening, Tracy. You know, the FACE Act is at the center of legal scrutiny since the Supreme Court's decision to overturn Roe. Among those testifying today was Catholic sidewalk counselor Mark Houck. He was arrested by the FBI and eventually acquitted in federal court. Now, he tells me that the FBI's use of force to arrest him was unjustified.
We said we would come into your office. You don't need to bring a disruption to his family. You don't need to scare his children. You don't need to terrorize them. It was just a totally reckless endeavor on the part of the government.
Houck told lawmakers his story of the FBI arrest, how 20 armed agents came to his house, pounded on his door, and held guns on his family. Just like the recent Durham report showed, Houck claims it's another example of the weaponization of the FBI.
The intention was to humiliate me, to scare my children, and to instill fear in pro-life America.
Since the overturning of Roe, pro-life pregnancy care center workers testified about hundreds of attacks on centers and Catholic churches.
There have been numerous false narratives and outright lies told about the work of pregnancy centers. Minnesota is sadly one of the many states that have quickly turned into a hostile environment for pro-women, life-affirming organizations like ours.
Committee members tell me current FBI regulations are not being followed and suggest more drastic action.
And there's but one way to fix it, I think. That is, the funding that goes to those departments has to be cut in an extremely material way. You've got to see reorganization of that entire branch of government.
Mark Houck tells me since he was acquitted, he's filed a lawsuit against the FBI and still continues with his mission as a sidewalk counselor outside the abortion clinic, attempting to save the lives of the unborn. At the Capitol, Eric Rosales, EWTN News Nightly.
We're also tracking a high-stakes meeting at the White House. President Joe Biden invited congressional leaders to discuss the debt ceiling. Negotiations have been crawling along. The U.S. Treasury warns America could run out of money to pay its bills as soon as June 1st if there is no agreement. White House correspondent Owen Jensen reports.
Tracy, this is the second week in a row President Joe Biden has met with House Speaker Kevin McCarthy. Talks have been happening in closed-door meetings between White House and congressional staff. Both sides keeping a very close eye on the calendar. June 1st, just over 2 weeks away, and President Joe Biden very soon heading overseas.
Ahead of today's meeting on the debt ceiling, White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre addresses the situation from President Joe Biden's perspective.
This is a president has been around the block a few times, right? When you think about negotiations, he knows how to make deals. He knows how this works. There's no one more experienced in knowing how to get this done.
Talks have been underway at the Capitol for much of the past week on what it would take to craft a budget deal that would unlock a separate vote to lift the nation's borrowing capacity, now set at $31 trillion. The press secretary was also asked about the Durham report that probed the Russia investigation for several years.
We believe in an independent Department of Justice. That's what the president said when he was running, and that's what the president has said the last 2 years.
Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, a likely presidential candidate, tweeted, "The Durham report confirmed what we already knew. Weaponized federal agencies manufactured a false conspiracy theory about Trump-Russia collusion. It reminds us of the need to clean house at these agencies, as they've never been held accountable for this egregious abuse of power."
Meanwhile, President Biden heads to Japan tomorrow for the G7 or Group of Seven summit, and that includes a bilateral meeting with Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida. At the White House, Owen Jensen, EWTN News Nightly.
A controversial art exhibit titled God is Trans, a queer spiritual journey remains inside of a Catholic church in New York. A spokesman for the Paulist Fathers told CNA Monday that the priests have removed the sign. A new name and description is currently being worked on by the artist. A priest in Ohio has been convicted of child sex abuse. A federal jury found 56-year-old Michael Zacharias guilty on 5 counts of sex trafficking. The crimes involved 3 victims, 2 of whom were minors when the abuse began. Zacharias faces a minimum of 15 years in prison. Pope Francis has issued a new constitution called the Fundamental Law of Vatican City State. The new constitution emphasizes the power of the Pope over the sovereign state and is the 3rd one in history, replacing a law promulgated by St. John Paul II in 2000. The new law goes into effect June 7th. Joining us now from Rome is Andreas Tannhauser, EWTN Vatican Bureau Chief. Andreas, great to see you. So what more can you tell us about this new law?
Well, it is quite a significant change to the legal framework of the Church, Tracy. And it's remarkable because of 3 things. First, it's a rare occasion. The last time it was Pope John Paul II who changed the fundamental law of the Vatican City State in the year 2000. The first constitution was issued already in 1929 following the Lateran Pacts and stayed in place until the turn of the millennium. Secondly, it empowers the laity, allowing laypersons to become part of the governing commission of the Vatican City State. Before that, and as is the case right now, only cardinals were allowed to be members. And thirdly, it emphasizes the sovereign power of the Pope over the state. Now, this should not come as news, as it's always been clear that the Vatican is not a democracy, but a monarchy with the Holy Father as the absolute ruler. The new constitution also has another objective: to establish more transparency, a goal that Pope Francis also had with his reform of the Curia, the leadership of the global church.
And Andreas, as we know, Pope Francis often urges transparency outside and within the church. Do you think this new legal framework will actually achieve that?
Well, in a statement issued along with the new constitution, Pope Francis justified this new legal framework with the idea of modernization. He said he issued it, and I quote, "to meet the needs of our time." And it's true, Tracy, the needs of a modern government have changed dramatically since the turn of the millennium. In the end, the Vatican is also a state with all the same challenges as states are facing today, from digitalization to money flows, international transparency, and government's requirements, etc. But it's important to remember that this new law is not a revolution, but it's more a renovation. It re-emphasizes the old idea that the city-state and its governorate is at the service of the successor of Peter and his mission to preserve the Word of God and to promote it to all people. The Vatican State does not exist in its own purpose, but is an instrument to be used for evangelization. This thought is consistent with what we have seen also just a year back with the new constitution for the Roman Curia, which Pope Francis has put into effect. He also emphasized there the priority of evangelization by joining the Congregation for the Evangelization of the Peoples with the Dicastery for New Evangelization, and made one big dicastery of evangelization that he is heading directly. Another parallel was the objective of transparency, especially when it comes to financial assets. All were placed under one central management, namely the Apostolic Patrimony of the Holy See, or as we know it also as APSA. And this push for transparency is much needed, as the latest report of the Vatican Supervisory and Financial Information Authority for the year 2022 has proven. There were still 128 cases of suspicious activity reported, and they led to 5 suspensions.
And Andreas, quickly before I let you go, curious, who's leading the government of the Vatican?
So this is another remarkable aspect, Tracy. Well, you know, the current head and president is Cardinal Fernando Verges Alzaga from the Legionaries of Christ. The Secretary General is a woman, namely Sister Raffaella Petrini. And given the new constitution, I personally at least believe, and that's a matter of speculation, that she or some other women religious or lay person might be named to helm the Vatican city-state next.
Andreas, thank you so much for that report. Always appreciate it. Andreas Tannhauser, EWTN Vatican Bureau Chief. Thank you again. And we have a lot more still to come on EWTN News Nightly, including trouble in the system. Arustado reveals what it's like for older and disabled foster children. And from Rome to America, the Museum of the Bible unveils a new exhibit that brings Rome to the U.S. May is National Foster Care Month, and a new study is shedding some unfavorable light on the foster care system. The report from the American Enterprise Institute says in part that some older foster children and those with special needs are living in temporary settings that include hospital rooms and even homeless shelters. As of September 2021, there are around 400,000 U.S. children living in foster care. We go now to Herbie Newell, one of the authors of that study and president and executive director of Lifeline Children's Services, the largest evangelical adoption organization here in the United States. Herbie, great to have you on. Talk to us more about this report and what stood out to you the most.
Yes, certainly. So we know that the U.S. passed the Families First Act, and while in principle it's a great act, which says we want to try to get children in families and foster families and try to keep them out of institutions. However, the lag from that is because there aren't enough foster homes currently in the United States. There aren't immediate access to homes for kids that are coming into foster care. And so unfortunately, what we're seeing, especially in larger areas and larger counties, we're seeing kids that are being institutionalized, not in a group home for foster children, but like the report says, in hospitals, in ERs, in psychiatric centers around our country. And that's not a safe place for children.
No, not at all. I mean, there were also some, really surprising revelations and very concerning. Talk a little bit more to us about the lack of housing and what do you think can be done about that?
Well, I think as we especially look after the Dobbs decision in a post-Roe world, it is paramount for believers of Christ Jesus to rise up, like he tells us in his word, and not only to support women who are pregnant, unplanned or crisis pregnancies, but also to rise up and to open up our homes for their children who can't stay in their homes, who can't stay in their care. We need believers who are going to be active about getting kids in foster care into safe places. And so I would encourage your viewers and anyone that's listening, as we celebrate National Foster Care Month in May, this is a great opportunity to be equipped by your local county and to say, I'm willing to care for a child who's been born, whose mother's chosen life, and to care for them in their great time of need.
Yeah, it's so important. Another item in the report finds that 4 out of 5 of children and adolescents who are in foster care, unfortunately, they develop mental and emotional illnesses. It's so really sad. Talk to us more about this and what do you think can be done to help these children?
Certainly, what we see any child that's removed, in the way that children are removed in foster care, they experience a lot of trauma, a lot of loss. Also, unfortunately, the average number of homes that a child in foster care is in during their duration of stay in foster care is between 2.5 to 3 homes. So we know these kids are not just tossed back and forth from bio family to foster family, but they end up in different foster homes in different settings. Stability is such an important thing for children. As a matter of fact, that's why the United States legalized marriage, to bring stability for children. And so when we don't have a foundational of marriage, we don't have a foundation of family, and children are not going to safe places. They're not going to homes where there's stability. They begin to have all type of traumatic responses. They begin to have all types of mental anguish. And that's what we're seeing in these children, which is why I think it's so important that we provide safe spaces, even if it's congregate care for the interim. We need safe spaces where kids can be secure, where they can know where they're going to be at that night, and they know that they're safe. Safety, security, and stability are the biggest things that our kids need right now.
Indeed. Herbie, before I let you go, we have 20 seconds left or so. Any final thoughts?
Again, this is National Foster Care Month. One of the most pro-life things that we can do is to stand up for moms, children, and kids in foster care, and to show that we really are a pro-life America.
Yeah, we're going to leave it right there. Herbie, thank you so much for coming on and talking to us all about this. God bless you, and God bless your work.
God bless you.
Up next on EWTN News Nightly, politics and religion. In part 2 of our interview with Archbishop Warda, we take a look at the political landscape of Iraq. Plus, the Museum of the Bible brings a cherished Catholic tradition all the way from Rome. Welcome back. In the second part of our interview with Archbishop Bashar Warda, the Catholic leader discusses the current situation in Iraq and his concerns over the number of Catholics in the Middle East.
The Holy Father, his trip to Iraq was really significant. What did that mean to the Iraqi people?
It meant a lot because for 17 years, almost 17 years, people, the whole world was watching a violent Iraq. Bombing, kidnapping, killing, you could tell, always problems. For the first time, they saw a joyful country, joyful people celebrating the visit of really an important guest. And you could tell from the social media how joyful they were. At least Pope Francis put us right in the front of everyone to say, this is one of the most important component of the Iraqi society, and you are all brothers. You are all brothers.
Are you seeing some positive changes at all over in Iraq or in the Middle East when it comes to Christians and Christian persecution? Anything turning around?
I would say yes. We need to give it time. The only concern is that our people, because of the past, which is still real in their lives, are not patient. And that's why the decline of the number of the Christians worried me, yes, and worried all the people who are really responsible for the churches there. But we are people of hope.
What is the situation in Iraq right now, economically, within the government?
Iraq is a rich country, you know, selling, I mean, last month, according to the news, that the Ministry of Oil have sold over $7 billion of oil. But everyone recognizes that corruption is the most dangerous enemy that we are facing in all of its Iraqi institutions and society. The government have shown and promised to fight this corruption with the help of course, international community. But I would say this would be the biggest enemy that we are going to keep fighting.
I don't want to forget to ask you about this. It's been almost a year since EWTN helped to launch, that is Asimina. Let's talk about that and the importance of having that Catholic news agency in Erbil, Iraq.
It's really a sign of hope that our brothers and sisters are not just interested, but they are keen to hear about our news and about our lives there. And I spoke to our staff there because we've celebrated a year of that of the creation of this living community there, that we should really go now to another stage of having also videos and pictures and images, because it's not just news, but now it comes as a full picture. And I hope that EWTN will continue the support to get pictures, because I believe that it's important also for our brothers and sisters around the world to see a living community, a living church. They made a difference. Your prayers, your help have made a difference in the life of the Christians in Iraq.
Before I let you go, is there any message to people that you would like to share from the Iraqi people, or anything else you would like folks to know about what's happening to Christians over in Iraq and the Middle East?
I would say a word of thanks to all of you, to all of the people who are listening and watching, for their prayers and for their support. A word of thanks also to all of the people who are spreading the news and our story, sharing our story also, and praying for the Christians in Middle East and Christians in Iraq. Keep us in your prayers. We need it. And also, if there is any way of help, be sure that this help is making a big difference in our lives. And God's grace and your help have made it possible for us to continue our mission.
Well, Your Excellency, thank you for your time. We're very grateful.
Thank you. God bless.
Well, finally tonight, a new exhibit in the nation's capital is drawing heavily from the Vatican libraries. The Museum of the Bible is hosting a Journey of Faith, the 7 Pilgrim Churches of Rome. It examines the 7 churches at the heart of the Eternal City through art, sacred objects, and history. And joining us now is Jeff Glowa, Chief Curator Officer with the Museum of the Bible. Jeff, great to be with you. Thanks for coming on today. Tell us more about this incredible exhibit and some of the highlights, especially items that are on loan from the Vatican.
Well, thanks for having me on, and thanks for talking about this exhibition. We're very excited about this new exhibition from the Vatican Library. It features beautiful art prints of the pilgrim churches in Rome, the 7 pilgrim churches. Some of these date from the 16th century, 17th century, and are beautiful art objects in themselves. But also we hope that guests have the opportunity to reflect on the discipline of pilgrimage and how these practices have been helpful over the centuries.
Yeah, and for those who may not be familiar, talk to us about why the pilgrim churches are really so important and what made your museum want to highlight them.
Well, it's a very traditional practice. It was reinvigorated in the 16th century by St. Philip Neri to provide an opportunity for pilgrims from around the world to have a shared religious experience, no matter where they were from, and to have the opportunity to reflect on the lives of the saints, to worship in these places, and to have that shared experience. And of course, pilgrimage is a very important theme, really, for all of us, to find those times and places to step back and reflect. In the case of the saints, to reflect on their lives and their examples for us. And of course, we're very honored to have this exhibition in partnership with the Vatican Apostolic Library. We have a gallery set aside for their objects, and this is just the latest exhibition in that partnership that we'll have for the next 6 months. So it's a great opportunity to see some beautiful objects from Rome that you cannot see otherwise, and to learn more about this practice.
Yeah, and what else do you hope people, gain from this exhibit?
Well, again, you could approach it in several ways. The prints themselves are just gorgeous. Piranesi, very famous engraver, produced some beautiful etchings of, St. Peter's and St. John Lateran. And to see what these looked like in the 17th century, 18th century, there's a pilgrim map that shows the churches, the 7 churches. It's a fun one. One is dated 1575, and then a second one, 1590, and you can see the changes in St. Peter's Basilica, some of the additions to St. John Lateran. So it's a combination of things. It's a architectural study, art study, and then again, the learning more about the discipline of pilgrimage, which might not be familiar to many people.
And Jeff, before I let you go, where can people get more information, and how long does this exhibition run?
The exhibition runs through mid-September of 2023, and you can find more information on our website at museumofthebible.org.
Great, Jeff. Thank you so much for being with us and sharing all this. We appreciate it.
Thank you. Take care.
And we thank you for watching tonight. Remember, you can follow us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at EWTN News Nightly. I'm Tracy Sable. Good night, and God bless.